1, 2, 3, 4. Pedagogy a go-go. Pedagogy go-go-go. Hello, and welcome to Pedagogy a Go-Go, a podcast about college faculty sharing what happens in their classrooms and why. This is episode 4, Summer Lovin, and we are your hosts, Gina Turner and Tom O'Connor. Hi, Tom.
Gina, hey.
It's summer.
It is summer. I was going to say it's the summer doldrums, but you sound so happy that it's like I feel like there's a cool breeze behind your back.
Well,
I'm stuck in an eddy.
It's not 100 degrees with a real feel of 108 anymore. So I think I am actually not feeling the doldrums.
I wilt like a flower in 85 and up.
I hear you. I'm with you, man. And we've got a week and a half until we have to be back on campus. And so, of course, I might start putting my classes together. I'm kidding. I'm about 5%.
It's undone, right?
Done.
That's the hardest part. You face the blank page.
Exactly. So we are doing a special episode. As Tom said, a very special episode.
It is. So like I said, it's. Are we jumping the shark if it's our 4th episode and we're already doing a quote unquote special episode? But it's not a bottle episode. It's not a clip show. We're just peeling back the curtain to see the Wizard of Oz. That works. Yeah.
That's
wizards.
perfect.
Wizards.
Yes.
Wizards plural.
Remember that comic strip, The Wizard of Odd?
No.
Do you remember that? Did I make that up?
It sounds great.
I think it was a thing. We'll put it in the show notes.
We're going to try. Let's see if it comes up on Google.
So we are going to be having a wonderful conversation with Jeff and Kelly, the men behind the show. And we're going to be talking about what we wanted to accomplish with the show, and then you're going to get to hear their non-guilty pleasures, as well as the one word that describes them and us in the classroom.
Yeah, we get put in the hot seat a little bit this episode. So if you've been waiting for us to be grilled, this was the right day to tune in.
So hopefully you're drinking something cool in these August days, and I hope you enjoy the show. If you had just one word to describe yourself as a teacher, what would it be? Like a little pipe blasting the air out of your dashboard as you're driving your car.
Wasn't that like a thing?
Smell-o-vision?
Like it was real, right? Like you could
movie
go to
theaters and stuff.
Do they still do it?
Roger, was it Roger Corman?
Corman, I don't know.
It was some movie director producer like of schlocky films introduced it.
But I thought it was like the super hoity-toity movie theaters. Like you'd go there and you'd sit in those like plush like recliner chairs.
Oh, that's possible. This would have been like, this is more like the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. This was like, well, no, it was like the 1990s
gimmicks
maybe.
to get people into the movies. This is, when movies were real spectacles. Like for the early horror films, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, they'd have like hired people. They'd be like faint during the movie, and they'd take pictures of them as they were being carted away, and they would then advertise that this movie is so shocking that
people were so gullible. And I'm sure
they're
that
not at all now.
Well, no, I'm glad you say that, because I know that like when like historians go to write about like the period we're living in right now, I'm sure they're going to be like, wow, people were really gullible. Mm-hmm. Like they just would believe any old nonsense.
Which is so interesting, because really then gullible is really just ignorant almost.
I was going to say it's more about received knowledges, like in terms of we're all born into worlds where, like, if we're raised in, this is not to knock religion, but if we're raised in a particular religious household, that's received knowledge that we get, that at some point we either need to look elsewhere and reject in some way, or just accept it over something else.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps the history should be more about the methods of mass deception.
Ooh.
I think it's more about our means of being deceived than how gullible we are.
Ooh, what a great 200 level class that would be, like a 200 level history class, like
Yeah.
the paradigms of deception kind of. Yeah, because it's true.
As a psychologist, I would expect you to be talking about the means by which we deceive ourselves.
I'm trying to think, like, how could we turn that then into like a whole like semester's worth of coursework for students, where they take like a history course where it focuses on this theme of like deception, and then psychology, sociology, obviously English.
I took a great course on paranoia, which was pretty close. It's the way paranoia works in terms of the paranoid mind is all about self-deception, about fixating and then making everything map onto what you believe to the exclusion of rational thought.
Did you leave more paranoid than ever?
Yeah, I did.
Are we recording?
We are.
We are.
Yeah.
So there's a book, and I won't say the name because it would be profanity. But it's Bull Star. And it was written by a professor at the University of Washington.
Philosophy professor, right?
I think so. You know more than I do, it sounds like, but because I can't remember his name. But basically, that book would work really well too, because it's about how people are able to pass on information to us that is faulty, and we eat it up, basically.
And sometimes inflicted on our students.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like like deep your math knowledge is, but I wonder if like how would math fit into that theme of deception? Like,
Well, there's the quote I always use when I teach stats, the little bit of stats I teach, and I think it was Mark Twain who said it, is there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. So statistics. Oh, and Josiah Mount has this great presentation he does about the presentation of data. So, depending on how you scale the chart, you can make a difference look huge, or you can make a difference look tiny. So just by skewing the X and Y, the units of the X and Y axes.
Yep.
So, math can totally be used for nefarious purposes.
So a mathematician, though, a pure mathematician would say that numbers don't lie, right? But we lie with math all the time.
yes. Oh, all the time. Yeah. So all we need to do is just find someone from like another like non-humanities discipline so that we can round out that full semester's worth of work and write up a grant.
Yeah.
Okay. Podcast over.
Well, it does kind of lead us into talking about what the idea of this podcast is. But I wonder if maybe first, we have been doing this podcast, Tom and I, as your hosts, but Jeff and Callie have been doing all the hard work behind the scenes, but they haven't actually gotten a chance to introduce themselves to the people listening to the podcast. So I'll go in alphabetical order. Jeff, do you want to go ahead and give a little intro?
You went first name alphabetical order.
I did go first name alphabetical order because I had written down.
As unusual it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Because I had written down J and K.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So my name is Jeff Armstrong, and I am a psychology faculty member here at Northampton Community College. And I'm more and more beginning to think of myself as sort of a pseudo audio engineer. And I think I do my best to try and handle most of the technical stuff behind the scenes to bring the podcast to life.
Yay.
It's marvelous, darling. Okay, so I guess alphabetically it's my turn. So I am Kelly Allen, professor of English here at Northampton Community College, and I am also the kind of co-founder and coordinator of the East 40 Community Garden, which is this space that we have here on campus to really kind of get into issues regarding food production, but I guess more importantly, food culture, and discuss issues revolving environmentalism. And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to agriculture, but we really kind of flex our food muscles, if you will, out there.
Yay.
That's me.
Well, so Jeff spoke a little bit to his role in this podcast, although in I would add a very incomplete way. In addition to sound design and editing and kind of creating the polished product, the the conversations we have with Jeff before and after, and sometimes the eyes you make at me during, guide and craft this as much as anything else. So it rises above sound production and design. But Kelly, you didn't speak to your role in terms of this podcast
and official title.
Yes, most importantly,
podcast godfather.
No.
Dreamweaver.
What?
You made us an offer we couldn't refuse.
So wait, what's showrunner? Is that
I think that's what we're calling you. Yeah.
the official term?
Yes.
Still don't really understand what
That's
that means.
the term of art in the teens, anyway.
And then podcast daydreamer, I think was the other one.
Podcast
Yeah.
daydream.
Yes.
So so since I don't know what those mean, I really don't know what my role is, other than like I like to think of myself as kind of the outside set of ears, if you will, to kind of process what is being said in this podcast and reflect that back on the two of you, Gina and Tom, and just kind of like help guide this thing along and see if we can, stay true to, or as near to true to, our mission as we can.
So if I can play psychoanalyst for a second.
Oh, please do.
So
Really, you, Tom?
in terms of right.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be Gina, and it's not going to be you.
Exactly.
It's
We've
going to be
already
the guy with the lit
established
background.
who the Freud fan is in the room.
Start at the beginning, darling. So like you spoke about the mission. So as a bit of history, so where did the idea for this podcast come from? Because it was yours.
So I try to listen to podcasts as often as I can, because it's just as a parent of two small children, like I don't get to read as much as I'd like to. So I use podcasts like, while I'm like doing the dishes or, whatever kind of like mindless task as a way to just kind of keep my brain busy, but also as a form of entertainment, if you will. So podcasts are really big in my household. But there's a friend of mine who teaches at a college nearby that has this fantastic podcast, and they would have faculty or staff guests for each one, and it was extremely entertaining. You got to learn a lot about these individuals, but they never got into their teaching. So here they are, this institution of higher education, and like they're not talking about like why they're there in the first place. And that's no knock of them, because again, it was a brilliant podcast. They just wrapped up, I think it was this past March, and I think they maybe went on for, it might have been like 4 or 5 seasons, and it was great, very professionally done, much like this one, Jeff. But just the fact that they didn't talk about the classroom was something that really kind of like dug at me, and it's like, here's like something that should be talked about more, and I knew that here at Northampton that this is a prime place to be having that conversation. So I just kind of came into Jeff's office, I think uninvited, as I typically do.
Yes.
I find it's far more effective to kind of get things done, to just make the rounds, if you will. If you do it
absolutely.
through text or email, it's too slow. So I just walk around campus, go to the doors, and then say, "Hey, I got this idea." So I just spoke with Jeff about it, because I know that you have experience podcasting, and here we are, and we're talking about teaching. And I just think that it's good work. It's certainly work that needs to be done. And it's certainly work that should be done from the community college level as well. I mean, granted, we're going to have guests coming from colleges and universities, and I'm really looking forward to those experiences. But I don't know. I think that in regards to higher ed, that community colleges are going to really play a significant part in the positive direction we go in.
It's great. I was so excited that you wandered into my office and asked me if I wanted to be a part of this.
I just sound like I'm some wandering drunk.
But a very productive wandering
Exactly.
daydreamer. We'll stick with daydreamer and not drunk.
Right. Wandering minstrel. And for me, one of the things I love about being involved in this podcast is being able to talk to other people about being in the classroom, because as I think came up in one of our previous podcasts, you're all by yourself in there most of the time as the instructor, right? You've got the students there, obviously, but you are the one who is in charge of what happens in that room, and it can feel a little bit lonely sometimes. So I for me personally, it's really inspiring and helpful and idea producing to talk to other instructors about all of this stuff. So it's definitely been a highlight for me doing the podcast.
I'm trying to think how you approached me. Was it just an email?
Jeff did it for me.
It was Jeff. It's like a Trojan horse. Slide it in there.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. Sorry.
no, I just to share like what Gina was saying, I was immediately like intrigued. Of course, I was wildly unqualified. The first thing that happened when I went home, my wife Becca, I said, "Hey, I was asked to do this podcast." She's like, "You've never listened to a podcast in your life. You don't know anything about podcasts. Why the heck did they ask you?" I was like, "I don't know, really, I don't." But the idea, the opportunity to talk about teaching, to talk about the classroom, which you're right, we don't have enough opportunities just to do the actual talking. But I think my goal was, can we talk about it differently? So, sometimes we might talk about our classroom experience to a friend or a significant other who is not themselves a teacher, right? So they don't necessarily bring a shared perspective into it. Or conversely, we crack a bottle of Chardonnay and maybe don't talk about, what we do in the best possible terms because we've had a bad day. I think this was an opportunity to talk about those bad days in a realistic way, to lay ourselves and them vulnerable so that we have more better days, and that we talk about, education and its possibilities and working with students in as positive a manner as possible about what we can be doing, what we want to be doing.
Right.
And every new person that we bring in just brings a new perspective. And, and I don't know what it's like to listen to this podcast, but to sit here and participate in it, it makes me appreciate what I do more and more every day, and expands the possibilities of what that can be.
Jeff, you are sitting and listening to us record these things and then have to put them together. So, of course, you listen to it more than anyone else in the room, I think.
Probably.
Do you feel like we are accomplishing anything?
Absolutely. I mean, when we had that first conversation with Sharon, the first recording with Sharon, I mean, I was giving Kelly Allen, who was in the room with us, looks like we've got something here. I really think that we're onto something. She was just so inspiring. And I think the questions that we had put together to ask her really got to the heart of, what drove her and the impact that she had on this community and her ability to articulate that, and then us capturing it. I just thought there's something really meaningful and valuable there. So absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I really like that, because I feel like we are we value Sharon so much, and it was an opportunity for us to share how much we value her.
Right.
And I hope that everyone, I mean, we've talked to 3 people so far, but I hope all 3 of those people are really getting the sense of how much we value them.
Right.
And their unique contributions and ability and charm and intellect and creativity and all the things that they've shared with us when they've talked to us. So I hope they hear this.
Yeah. Gina, it's a good thing my answer to your question was yes, by the way, genuinely. Because if it was no.
This was going to be a very uncomfortable episode.
I think we're wasting our time.
Oh, this could have been fascinating, though. So what else do we want to do with this podcast? What else do we want to see ourselves accomplishing with the podcast that we haven't done yet?
Well, I think that we need to listen some more. And what I mean by that is we need to, just keep bringing in guests as we have planned. I would like to see us just kind of collect this body of information, if you will, from the shared stories from our colleagues here at Northampton and also from colleagues at other colleges, and just kind of like find out what's going on in higher ed. And then after maybe like a full academic year of that, so I don't know how many months, I should know this, but after a full academic year of listening to the shared stories of our colleagues, maybe kind of at this time next year, the four of us can, step back and be like, okay, so what is it that's being said? And then hopefully we can use that information to kind of like have themed years on some of the bigger issues that are coming out. And yeah, I think that's the direction I would like to see this podcast going in.
Thank you for using the word. I love that you use the word shared stories twice. Because I think about the project that we're doing very much in the vein of narrative and story. And one thing that we're doing is collecting stories in almost the Studs Terkel-like fashion, or inviting people in to share their experiences, within the classroom, the formative experiences that led them to be into the classroom, and stories then don't exist in isolation. Like stories produce dialogue. We reflect on them within the podcast, and then I know we reflect on them afterwards. Gina said we've spoken with 3 people so far, 3 faculty members. But beyond the podcast, I've spoken to so many people about the people we brought into the podcast who listened to it. And I have this kind of fantasy that however many people listen to this podcast, if they're enjoying it, they hear those stories and then they share them, they pay them forward. They share those stories and they invite other people to listen to them. So, I mean, I see that as a big part of the project.
Yeah. I should have took notes and brought them in with me, but there's like one of the kind of the driving like pieces of information that I brought into this podcast and why I wanted to do it. It's from, and this kind of like builds off of what you're just saying with the shared stories. It comes from Bell Hooks' Teaching to Transgress, and she has this one chapter. And again, I can't remember what it is, but it's about creating theory, like, and who gets to do that? Like, who is in a position of authority for theorizing, like, parts of our lives, but also how education works. And again, if I'm remembering this correctly, because it's been years since I've read this, but one of the arguments that she made is that quite often what we see in the world of academia is that those who are theorizing about how education works are those who aren't necessarily practicing that discipline. So what I'm hoping that we can get from this podcast is that we get to hear from the people who are doing the actual work, and then allowing them, or creating this space, if you will, that allows them to then be those who create the theory. So like they're the ones who are creating knowledge, if you will, that will then help kind of inspire others, or help just others make sense of their lives, So hopefully there's some things that are happening that we heard from our previous guests where, a listener's like, wait a minute, that's exactly what's going on in my classroom. Okay, I thought I was, as you all said before, I thought I was alone in this. Because, quite often the only people that we get to talk about teaching with are those who evaluate us, like our deans, and sometimes maybe a senior faculty member, and maybe like a friend or a partner. I mean, I guess we could go to Rate My Professor and see what our students are saying about us, but I don't recommend that. So I just think that this is a way to kind of break down that loneliness, if you will.
I love 2 things that you've said. One of them is this idea that we would take themes we've heard throughout a year of doing the podcast and then create content or programming based on that. I love that idea so much. I think that's so awesome. And then the other thing is one thing that has struck me about each of our three guests is that they each really have a strong philosophy of how they want to present the information in the classroom.
Yeah.
Like there's something really important about the way they frame what they talk about. Because Charlie really, homed in on this idea of how he wants to talk about a concept that is a social concept, but from a biological perspective, race. And I just thought that was so cool, right? To have this different lens on a topic that can be so fraught. And so it's something that I try to do in my classes, and I think more and more try to sort of come up with the kind of overarching lens that I'm shining the information through to contextualize it. So it's so fun to hear the different contexts that people use in which to teach. It's very cool.
I'm reflecting on loneliness. You used that word. No, but it I think the classroom, for being a vibrant social space, is a kind of solitary space for the teacher alone at the front of the classroom or in a circle with their students. There is something solitary in the way we reflect and process what we're doing. And this affords us opportunities for new connections, I think, between other faculty and other interested members who are interested in how we teach.
Yeah, I mean, especially like at a community college where, so when you look at how we're evaluated, it's teaching, college service, and then I think professional development. Like that teaching part is such a strong part of like who we are supposed to be that I think in some ways, like when we are in the classroom, like there can be that sense of intense vulnerability. Because like we could be like, our harshest critics, if you will, but if we're not getting kind of any, I guess, like useful feedback other than that, like sometimes crazy voice in the back of our head, that can be unhealthy.
I'm glad you said that because it can be really painful. I mean, you are vulnerable. Kelly and I just were in a panel for the Smart Start orientation this summer, which, if you're not at NCC, is an orientation for, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, for first generation new college students straight from high school, or is it?
I think I'm not sure how strong the first generation part is,
okay.
But it's typically students who from whatever like information gathering process the college has done, that these are students who are at risk.
Okay.
So again, I don't know how they deem that, but
I think somebody told me once and I forgot. So we will fact check that and put it on the webpage.
Yeah.
I flinched when you said at risk. I have like a reaction to that word, but you're not incorrect. And that's certainly the way that those students are talked about in the literature. And that's one of the things I think that we here can kind of reframe. I think it might also be, I also thought it was largely first generation students, and some of the identifiers were from testing, and if they were coming in at a double developmental level, then they were kind of flagged because we know that students who come in with math and reading and writing needs have a long way to go to 100 level coursework. Not always, I mean, and not all 100 level courses, but many of them that they'll need to get to the degree. And so it's that much harder, and the numbers associated with those students are not great statistically. We'll hope that statistic is a lie, but it probably isn't, because we watch them and we know that we lose a lot of those students.
Well, and that's really interesting too, because as, again, me not knowing exactly who I was talking to, sadly, I'll admit it. There was one student, well, there were two students in particular who I was really pitching my honors intro psych class to, because they seemed really, really interested and engaged, and kind of their eyes were lit up while we were talking about what it takes to be a good student, and they were asking a lot of questions. And I kind of forgot the reason I brought up the Smart Start orientation in the first place, but I'm kind of glad that we went off on this tangent, because I think it does tie back into what we were talking about, which is the feedback you get from students. You know, you would hope, you know, there's all the movies, To Sir with Love, and I don't know, that's my favorite one. But you know, where like the teacher makes a difference and everybody loves them. And at the end of To Sir with Love, you know, Lulu sings a song to Sidney Poitier. No one has ever sung a song to me at the end of the semester.
Yet.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is
we
true.
are going to change
Growth
that.
mindset.
But I was also thinking about, not only are we not necessarily getting, you know, direct explicit feedback, but we also have to hold that space for our students. You know, we have to keep it safe. We have to keep it on track. We have to keep it, you know, balanced. We have to leave room for spontaneity and questions. And all this is kind of getting me thinking about one of our fun questions that we always ask our guests, which is, can you describe your teaching in one word? So I'm about to start pointing at people and asking the people in this room.
Before you do, if we could just acknowledge Gina's incredible ability to transition, and knowing that it was time. I mean, it was time for us to transition. I'm calling it out, but I'm just saying it's incredible.
I listen to a lot
I appreciate
of podcasts.
it so much.
I listen to far too many podcasts. But thank you very much, Jeff. So back to my transition. But I also, I'm giving you a help, maybe when you think of that word, think about how you hold space in the classroom. Like, what is a word you use for the way in which you hold space? I'm spinning in my chair, and I'm gonna point at Kelly.
Okay. What do you?
I'm imagining the Doppler effect of
Oh, no.
you know, Jeff listening to how that sounds as you.
I just really enjoyed the visual.
Yeah, Gina did
for a
really
podcast.
spin in her chair. For those of you,
Now, I need. Okay, so two things. First is, what do you mean by hold space?
Good question.
Thank you.
I don't know, because I had this image of the teacher in front of the space of the classroom and kind of needing to make sure that those folks on the left in the back are not asleep, and the two over here on the right are not chit-chatting so much that it's distracting me and their neighbors, and that the person on the laptop is not, you know, doing their taxes, and also that the person in the middle, in the front row, isn't dominating the conversation, and that I'm not dominating the conversation. So like, it's like popcorn or whack-a-mole. Maybe that's the space.
So what is the question again? So wait, is it one word to describe yourself as a teacher, and also like how you
I know. I
space?
rambled for far too long.
Because I'm like, that's a tall order.
I know.
That's tough.
I was trying to kind of give you a visualization, and then think of a word for yourself in that space.
I think whack-a-mole.
Got it.
I think you got it with whack-a-mole.
I used to love whack-a-mole.
That's hyphenated, so that I think is actually one word.
One word. That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Whack-a-mole. That is awful. Okay. But I did say two things. So one thing, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, question mark after that word.
But then the second thing is, I do want to, after we're done with this, if you, Gina, the master of transitions, if you could help us transition back to what Tom was talking about earlier with at risk. I would really like to know why that is problematic. And I know that you really want to answer that right now, but you can't.
Jeff can edit it back. Just plug it back in.
Because I want to learn, like why that is. I'm fascinated with language, but So help with that, Gina. So here we go.
Okay.
All right. My one word for how I hold space far out is learner. And then I guess I have to explain that, don't I? So what I try to achieve in this shared space that our students and myself call the classroom is that I am there to learn from them as much as they are there to learn from me. There's like a lot of like Freirean like pedagogy in that, and I think once I'm able to make that clear, where they know that I'm being serious, that I really want to know what it is that they can bring to the table, it then becomes this what I have experienced to be like this very beautiful kind of just, I don't know, growth space, if you will, where whether or not a student feels that they understand the material of the course, they still feel that they can provide something of value. And then, of course, it's kind of like my responsibility as a member of this shared environment to kind of like navigate then these, very kind of like tricky conversation in a way that we are achieving, our outcomes. But I don't think that can really be done without, laying myself out first as an equal to I shouldn't say my students, to, my fellow classmates, if you will. Learner.
Cool.
Everybody's looking at me, which
You didn't
guess that means I'm
next.
next.
The guns.
I don't know. So I was thinking about this before we started recording, and I don't know that this necessarily addresses Gina's reframe, but so I'll just go with what I was originally thinking about. I think for about as long as I can remember, I've always thought about my approach in the classroom as being similar to that of a performer. And so I'll think of myself as a performer in the classroom. I don't know, when I get up in front of the class, I want to be so exciting and engaging and interesting and meaningful and invaluable to them that they can't look away, that they have to keep their eyes locked on whatever is going on in the classroom. And it's an improvisational performance. It's an audience interaction based performance. But it is always, as Kelly Allen takes a photo of us. So when you see it on the website, that was the moment right now when Kelly took the photo. But I do often feel like I'm performing with and for my class. In addition to that, after a class is finished, I feel exhausted. Like I really feel like I go in there and I give it my all. And then afterwards, I'm pretty much spent. So if I have to go sit in a meeting, I feel bad for the people who are in the meeting with me. That doesn't really, I think, capture some of the other things you talked about, Gina, with kind of balancing the class and picking up on certain cues. But just in terms of my initial approach, I want to go in there and I want to bring really good, positive energy that's genuine and keep students engaged and excited. And I fail at that probably quite a bit, but that's how I'm entering the classroom.
Well, I just know from the parade of students who are always coming to your office hours that you do not fail. You succeed. Parade.
I enjoy hyperbole, so I'll take.
They have floats and
majorettes.
But I think that being a performer in the classroom actually does take into, you didn't have to take into consideration my whack-a-mole metaphor, but it does, because a good performer has to be aware of their audience. So that the best performers have that very strong intuition into what's going on in their audience. So,
absolutely.
Great. All right, Tom.
I see how it is. I'm saving the best for last. My desire, of course, when asked any question like this, is to be as cheeky as possible. So, like, one word, trouble, because I like to problematize your assumptions.
It's your middle name.
Or raconteur, because I see myself, like, I share Jeff's image, like in terms of myself in the classroom as performing and as a teller of stories and trying to engage and rope students into that experience. But if I had to pick my one word, I'll be myself and then immediately problematize my choice. If you asked me to think in terms of space, and I would say Sherpa. And so I want to put a little asterisk by that, because I'm not referring to an indigenous Himalayan people who are exploited by a bunch of rich white folk who want them to take them to the top of a mountain so they can snap a selfie for their Instagram account. I'm referring to like a lay person's use of the word Sherpa as a person who is a guide, who kind of carries all these tools and things that sustain a journey on their back. And as a Sherpa, what I need to have coming into it is the lay of the land, right? So this is my physical space, is the class as mountain that we summit with our students. And the Sherpas, like many things, like they show students the different ways up the mountain, the different possible paths that they have. And they give students, ideally, I try to give students tools to accomplish different tasks that are going to get them further along in their studies and accomplish the learning outcomes that I want for my class. But the reason I kind of like this idea of the Sherpa as a Sherpa as a guide, but it's not about the Sherpa. The real explorers, the real journeymen, and the person who the journey is most important for, or the mountain climbers, right, which are the students. So my kind of, as Sherpa, I guess I kind of want to approach each class as I've done my research. Like for me, it's less about the journey of the class, and it's vocational, right? Being a Sherpa is my job. And so I need to know the landscape. I need to gather the materials for the students and make sure I always have them with me. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's the students who are directing their own journey as much as possible. I'm there to kind of help them say, well, look left or right. Well, now that we're seeing this formation, I'm really diving deep into this metaphor. I apologize, but now that we see this rock formation, how would you summit it? How would someone differently able to summit it? How might those of us in this space think differently about this problem before us? So Tamokana, Sherpa, but not in a racially insensitive way.
Preach. Awesome.
In
I'm
your
so
word?
happy right now. I'm just so happy listening to you guys and doing this podcast.
And the spotlight's now on you. One word, Gina.
A word popped into my head because I hadn't thought of a word before this, and then a word popped into my head, and then I thought, I don't want to use that word, and then I can't think of another word, so I'm just going to use it, and it's going to sound weird. Lover. And not in a weird way. Exactly. But so I'm teaching online this summer. I'm teaching intro psych this summer. And long story short, I have incorporated videos into the class because I had to. And it's turned out to actually be really fun. So I give my students the opportunity to record a video. They have to record a little video about something related to the class. And the last videos they did, they had to talk about this is turning into longer than it needs to be, but they had to talk about their character strengths, which is a thing you can do on this website. Google VIA, character strengths. Jeff is nodding his head. Mm-hmm. All of us psychology people love doing it.
Yeah.
And you find out your top 5, you find out your strengths, right? The things that you bring to the table that you can use to succeed in life.
Is this similar to like a Clifton strength?
There's a similarity, but yeah.
It's based in work by Martin Seligman, who's a really important figure in positive psychology. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend it. It's fun to take if you like taking online quizzes.
And it's free, unlike the Clifton Strengths Finder.
Yeah. And it's
clearly
free.
Clifton's not a sponsor of the show.
Not yet.
So anyway, I asked them to show me their character strengths in action. And so I showed them my character strengths in action, which was a stack of library books. Because I can't remember what number it is, but love of learning is one of my character strengths. I love psychology. I think it's so interesting and cool and fun and funny and weird and disturbing. And I just love sharing it with people and talking to people about it. And so I want my students, they're not going to love it as much as me because, I'm it's a little crazy, but but I want them to find something to love. I want them to find something to love in my class, in their life. I want to find something to love in them. I want them to find something to love in me. I want all of us to find things to love every day. And that's what I think love of learning means, and what learning should mean is to find that thing. You know, you mentioned it, Tom, the growth mindset. It means you're always looking to grow. And I think that love, I sound so cheesy right now.
No, I will have All You Need Is Love by the Beatles stuck in my head though for the rest of the day.
But love is nurturing, and it helps things grow. I'm not crying, really.
Holy
You're crying. Stop it.
smokes.
Shut up.
It kind of reminded me, by the way, of Kelly Allen at a Smart Start when I've been on the panel with him before, and you've talked about love in the classroom.
Oh,
I didn't do that this year.
No,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying. So there's a lot of love in this room, I
I got
Yeah.
so angry at them taking the devices away that I didn't talk about love.
what devices?
You didn't see that when we went in there, and they're like all of their cell phones were in a box.
Oh.
So they took
There were
their
those kind of teachers.
yeah.
think. There are some of
There's not that there's any, not that there's anything
nothing
wrong
wrong
with
with
that. 40% of our audience just went click.
I didn't know it was that kind of podcast. No, but dang, no, because like Gina, like as soon as you said lover, like I. Like,
You got really uncomfortable.
Well, no, totally not at all. So there's a book, The Lover by Marguerite Duras. It's, I hope I pronounced her last name correctly.
Can you say the name one more time? I really enjoyed the way you said her name.
Duras,
Oh, okay. Now I can hear it.
Duras, I think. I don't know. So, so I thought of that book, and it's like, oh, it's like, well, where is she going with this? With this image that's in my mind of this, young, like I think she was Vietnamese woman. But then I started thinking about, and this is how my brain works, so look out. This podcast is run by a crazy person.
A wandering minstrel.
Yes, totally. That can't play an instrument. There's the so that text was part of this other like group of fantastic novels I had to read when I was an undergrad. In this class, it was 20th century European literature, and a majority, if not all, of the texts in this class had like this lover character. So then, as as I started to understand, like what you meant by lover, and then kind of like juxtapose that with kind of my, imagination running with like all these texts that I had to read, which by the way, I'm going to take a slight detour here where that class, so I think it was like a 300 level class for undergraduates. It was 15 novels that we had to read in this class. But I mean, they're short, kind of like, like the Art Nouveau kind of things. I mean, some of them were pretty challenging, like, we had to read some Robbe-Grillet, and it was intense. But I learned then that, okay, students are very kind of pliable, so you can just like, if you think that there's just too much, it's never 15 like, French and German novels tough. But so anyway,
That is a high bar.
So, but I love the book. But so, I'm thinking, what's that? Tom, I need your help here. Thomas Mann's.
Death and Venice.
Thank you. Okay, so like there's a lover. There's.
Who needs Google? We've got Tom.
It's in a Siri. Hey, Tom.
English majors assemble. Okay, so so there's like a lover character in that, and then there was this other one, Jules and Jim. But I'm just thinking of like what is the role that the lover plays in kind of how the narrative arc shapes itself, how kind of the protagonist kind of evolves over the story. So I'm just trying to think of like, how is it, and again, this is, we who kind of practice the art of teaching, like, how is it that we can maybe use this concept of the lover to really kind of understand what it is that we do in the classroom, and maybe use these 20th century European literature like texts as a way to kind of like see ourselves in a different way. So in what way are we this young like Vietnamese woman, or how are we that young Italian boy in A Death in Venice?
So can I quickly because
Sorry.
I'm in love with this love discussion.
Yes.
And so I'm going to make a request of Jeff and ask that a video accompany what I'm about to do, because it's going to be very impressive, of Rodney Dangerfield at the end of Back to School when he does the double Lindy something or other.
Oh yeah,
Does anyone
the triple Linding.
The triple Lindy off of the diving boards, because I'm going to try to move from your love to at-risk students right now.
Ooh.
Let's see if I can do it. So some of what you're speaking of is, there's a lovely word from critical theory, and I came across it from a queer theorist whose name I don't remember. I only read a few articles by him, and he had a lovely.
You're starting vague here, Tom.
I know. I'm starting vague, and it was called identificatory performativity. But I know.
Sold.
I totally.
What now?
I'm not making this up.
I am sold.
Identificatory performativity is ultimately what you're speaking about, which is a model that I think we can model for our students, and we often do this through literature, which is to ask our students to identify in a really fundamental way with characters like these lovers that you're speaking about from very different backgrounds, and their own stories. Again, I'm coming back to stories. I'm wrapping it all together here. But I think we have to embody love in the classroom also in a more generalized way. And so I'm going to say something potentially controversial, which is that if you do not love teaching, and part of loving teaching is caring about your students, then you can't be a great teacher. You can't even be a really good teacher. That you have to love to be in that classroom, to try to reach someone, to care about their success, and to care about what you're teaching. That it has to have meaning, or at the very least use value, that you have to see its worth and convey that. Because when I think we lose that love, we stop teaching care and compassion, or embodying it in our teaching practices. Which brings me to why I flinched at-risk students, which is not that they're not at risk. Gina spoke about the two students who she was having a conversation with, who she wanted to recommend her honors intro to psych class. And I want to be, so my only issue with at-risk is not that as a designation, it's true if you're coming in with double developmental needs, if you are a first generation student, that your class, your race, all these are markers that we have metrics for to say how quote unquote at risk you are. And that may be true to some regard in terms of the numbers, but I don't think we can approach our students that way. I think it's really important that double developmental student with a real passion for psych comes in and we say, hey, we're going to get you the coursework you need, whether it's an O something, right? So not a 100-level course, to get you the skills so that at the end of it, you're getting A's in those classes, and we're going to get you a letter, and we're going to get you into that intro to psych course because you are and can be an honor student. And we sometimes forget when we talk about at-risk students that those can actually be the most exceptional students. And there is a lens, call it like even a lens of love, if you will, that does see them differently, which is that we have to find ways to transpose the strengths that they have in their lives that they have not associated with academics. So it could have been struggling financially. It could be taking care of a parent or a sibling at home. It could be surviving terrible trauma. But all of those, even terrible things by their persistence, by their being here, defines a great strength of character and will in them. And we as loving educators, I think, need to identify that by getting to know our students and then translate that into what we see as the academic strengths that we need from our students. And there is a way to do that, and sometimes it's through a developmental path. It might be through a lot of the models now are sidecars, where we put them into the 100 level and we give them the developmental needs alongside of it. And I think every student is different, and there's arguments for both of those paths. But so I don't know. I'm not sure if that was a triple, Lindy, or not. But I wanted to return to the at-risk. But I
Well
think
done.
love is a way to do it. And to
The
think
judges
about
are
it.
holding up 8.5, 8, 8.5.
Damn
Rodney
Russians.
got straight
Damn
10.
Russians gave me a 2.
I want to just say quickly about if you don't love being in the classroom, you can't be a good teacher. The only thing I wanted to say is there are different ways of loving being in the classroom. So I think that, my way of loving being in the classroom might be very different from someone who, loves being in the classroom because they know how important it is to have good welders in that. I don't even
And
know
I want to
anyone
clarify,
in particular.
I sometimes hate being in the classroom when I know that I'm not doing what I want, right? Or like, it doesn't mean that you always have to love
They're
being
not
in the
doing
classroom.
what they should be doing, right? Sometimes it's rough because the students aren't showing up.
I think I was just saying you need to love what we do, even
Yeah.
on the worst days, even when we hate what we do. It's family, right?
Value what we do.
Yeah.
Value what we do.
I mean, and a person who hates teaching could be a great lecturer, but that great lecturer, if they're not coming into it with a love of wanting to change and affect lives, they're never going to be a great teacher, even if they're a masterful lecturer. I think that's a personal. I said it was a controversial thought. Not everyone has to agree with me.
Okay, so I don't, at least for this podcast, I do not believe like what you said about love is controversial in any way, because like part of the conversations that Jeff and I had prior to giving this thing the green light was like the absolute necessity for positivity in these conversations, because, and I'm sure that all of our listeners out there will find what I'm about to say familiar, where like there's those whom we work with that anytime that we like see them, it's like just negativity in regards to like who their students are, like maybe negativity towards like administration, their colleagues, whatever, and that's not helpful. Like to think that our students are just a bunch of just I don't know, like kids who don't respect like what's happening in the classroom. They don't understand the value of education. Like a lot of these like negative words of like, can't and don't, and I don't think it's helpful. For like, ourselves as educators, but it's also not helpful for creating the positive relationship that I think is necessary to make that knowledge building happen. Like, and I need to, be careful with how I explain this next part, because I don't want to create this false like sense that there's a filter in this podcast, that we're not like really kind of like telling it how it truly is. But like one of the reasons why Jeff and I sought out the two of you as hosts for this podcast is because we know that you two are positive people, but you also seek out positivity. So that was like one of the reasons. And then the other reason is you both have amazing voices. So again, like,
Why, thank you.
Gina, you're amazing. So again, Tom, like I don't think that, again, in this podcast that love will ever be controversial. Like because Gina, as soon as you mentioned Lover, like I have just been feeling like just gooey, amazing. And I want to go, I still have all of those books from that class. I'm going to pull them all out and I'm going to find the Lover in every single one of them. So yeah.
Well, here's I know we need to move on, but there is the one critical thing that I have to say. So if we're going to not put the positivity filter on it for a second.
Sure, fire away.
Which is, and I'm going to spin it in a positive way because I always see the possibility as being potentially positive. But we all know people who've burnt out, who no longer care about what they're doing. They've, if you will, they've lost the love. They've lost their reason for being here. And so,
that's dark.
And we all, and we are always in danger of that, right? A couple bad weeks, or something else going on or stress overloading. It can happen to anyone. It doesn't make them a bad person because that they've gotten to that point. So here is where I think the community of what we're trying to establish can help, which is how can we create connections to make them remember why they loved what they do in the first place, because they're never no one's ever too far gone. And so, I mean, that's my hopeful spin, but there is the flip side of the coin of what I was saying is that those who don't, our students know it. They smell, they're like young kids. They know when someone is putting on a show for them.
You don't even have to be a young kid to smell
no,
that out.
I know. I mean,
but like in order to make that happen, to help make that change in our colleagues, like that change, which, I think that we believe that they want in themselves. Like I'm sure that people don't want to go to work feeling crappy about it. But in order to make that change, you must have like that very strong positive foundation. And that's what I'm hoping that we've established here, at least with this team, that we have that positive foundation that like even when things are at their darkest, we are going to find a way to Sherpa our way through.
Well, and I hope also that we are giving concrete ideas, or at least sparking concrete ideas that maybe someone never thought of doing before. That person who's like, I cannot face going into the classroom. Maybe they're like, oh, maybe if I tried this thing that Shanita mentioned, that could actually, change the direction of the classroom. So
you're sharing your strengths video idea, concrete idea that I probably will try at some point.
So far I haven't watched them yet because they were due on Monday, but I'm looking forward to watching the students. So I did one for operant conditioning where I showed me training my dog, and then students showed themselves training their dogs with rewards, and then a couple of students showed themselves training their toddlers, which was fantastic.
Which is absolutely what we do.
Absolutely. So, Kelly, once again, I'm so glad that you came back to this idea of the lover, the Sherpa, the entertainer, the learner, right? I said all four of us because it just makes me think that we are all cards in a deck, right? And that there is a multitude of cards in that deck of teaching, and that everyone can bring this different approach to the classroom. And it also got me thinking about our last fun segment of our podcast, which is I think we're now referring to it as our non-guilty pleasure, because there should be no guilt about it. So I'm going to share with you something that's going to make me sound even more woo-woo than I probably sounded already. So one of my dear friends was in town, and we got to chatting, and we were walking around my town, and we went into this store and we bought tarot cards. Nice. And I have been having so much fun learning about tarot cards. And like throwing my tarot cards and giving myself reading. It's just so much fun. And to me, it also relates so much to the subjective testing that's been used historically in psychology, back to psychoanalysis and the Rorschach test and the thematic apperception test, where you're kind of getting the person's unconscious thoughts about these images that they're being shown. And so I've been doing these readings, and then I like write poems based on it, and this is silly stuff like that, but it's also kind of keeping my brain alive because I'm trying to memorize the meanings behind the cards. So that is my new non-guilty pleasure, is reading tarot cards, and I've even thought about bringing it into the classroom to talk about phony psychics, right? And B, these kind of unconscious processing tests, right? And C, I don't even know what, but I'm going to find a way to give tarot card readings in my class. So awesome. I'm spinning around again, and I've landed on Jeff.
Okay. Guilty, non-guilty pleasure.
Yes.
I'm gonna share two. One that lacks pleasure and does bring real guilt.
Oh no.
And then one that I have no guilt toward but brings a lot of pleasure. The guilty non-pleasure one is that I'm a huge Knicks fan, New York Knicks. I'm a huge basketball fan, but in particular, I'm a huge New York Knicks fan. I would watch the Knicks with my grandfather, who grew up in the Bronx as a kid, and so there was a lot of nostalgia around the team and watching the games. But they're horrible. I mean, they've been really bad for a while, but they're also just a really bad organization, and ownership has been really poor. So it has not brought a lot of pleasure recently.
I'm sorry.
And so for that, I feel shameful and guilty. My non-guilty pleasure, the thing that came to mind for me was I have two young children, Juliet, who is 6, and Lola, who is 2.5.
Juliet is 6.
She is 6. Yeah, she's gonna be a first grader, and it's unfortunate that I needed to have a reason to regress and throw my body on the floor and act silly, and not to say that I wouldn't act silly as an adult, but there's just a childish type of silly that we don't allow ourselves to bring out unless we're with children, and I've just enjoyed and appreciated the opportunity to get to do that with them so much. And I try to do it as much as I possibly can, because I know the time is fleeting, and before I know it, they're not going to want to be rolling around on the floor with me. Like I'm the one instigating it most of the time now. So that's my non-guilty, very pleasurable thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Kelly, should we do an annoyingly physical contest like rock, paper, scissors to see who goes next to annoy all of our viewers out there?
Oh, sure.
Okay, let's do it. Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Oh, rock beats scissors. I win.
Oh.
I think that means you go first.
Okay.
We didn't establish the rules.
What are we doing again? Oh, yeah, the guilty pleasure thing. Okay, so Jeff, you took the family one because
Kelly kind of had like I feel like there was some anger in your gaze as I was wrapping up my non-guilty pleasure, and now I know why.
Well, I'm glad that my communication is clear, Jeff. No. Oh yeah, kids are awesome. Okay, so for me, I like to travel on 2 wheels. So it's either by bicycle or I have a little Honda Ruckus scooter. It's 49.9 cc's, so I don't need a motorcycle license to ride it. But I don't enjoy being in a car. So like I'm very fortunate that my commute is like only 5.5 miles. My wife, her commute is like I think 200 yards. So like we live right on the edge of campus where she works. But so we've been a 1-car couple for like 13 or 14 years.
Oh,
it's
great.
Yeah, it's awesome. But I really enjoy the freedom to like ride my bicycle to work or to ride the scooter if I don't want to show up all sweaty. But there's that novel Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. And there's this thing where he talks about the difference between like being on a motorcycle compared to like being in a car. And that is like when you're on a bike, like you are like part of your surrounding. You are part of the landscape or what have you. And where in a car, like you're kind of looking at things through these frames, be it through the frame of your front window or the frame of the side windows. And it couldn't be any more true. And I especially like the days when I can ride my bicycle in, because like you can hear the birds and smell the air, especially when you're behind a garbage truck, but it's cool. So that's my guiltless pleasure.
But Kelly, what about the wind?
We didn't record the wind part, so they don't know about the wind. But yes,
I'm going to edit this out for sure.
Yes.
Kelly hates wind.
Yes. Kelly hates wind. For those
You don't
of
even
you
have long hair for it to tussle and muss.
I know. Well, see, when I took the group photo, I wasn't in it, so yes, I have long hair. I love all weather except for wind, and especially when I'm on a bicycle, because if you've got a strong headwind, that's rough. Tom.
All right, I'm up. Like Jeff, I have a non-guilty pleasure and a pleasure that I definitely feel some guilt about. So just a little context. Like I carry quite a bit of anxiety around with me most of the time. It can be some of those times I'm actually struggling in the classroom, as often because I'm overthinking things. And the way that I relieve that anxiety, because I'm also prone to take all that anxiety right home with me, is I cook. Or I like put on a really silly hat and pretend I'm Indiana Jones in the weekend and try to hunt for things like antique tarot cards at little like junk stores and flea markets. Oh yeah, there was one on the Antiques Roadshow. It was like worth $10,000. These hand painted, they were great. We'll chat. So because I love to cook, I watch a lot of cooking shows. So my non-guilty pleasure, if you will, is like I'll pour a glass of wine and I'll put on like the Food Network, and it'll just be me and Ina Garden, waiting for Jeffrey to come home, and I'll just be like learning new recipes and like going into the kitchen and then cooking. I don't feel guilt about that. I do feel guilt about this. So we want to talk about models of bad teaching. I've got 2 words. Gordon Ramsay. Someone who just yells and screams. And I don't watch all of his shows, but I do watch MasterChef, and I hold a dear place in my heart actually for MasterChef Junior, where he softens up and pretends to be a cuddly bear.
I'll give you that
for that.
For sure.
But he's a can I say jackass?
I think that
the character he plays, definitely.
Okay. We'll see if that gets cut. Maybe Jeff can bleep that. So, but without using the curse word, I will say that I'll watch these and then I'll just be at home, and if something comes out wrong, I'll be like, touch it. Touch it. It's effing raw. I wouldn't serve that to my grandmother. Would you serve that to your dog? That's a terrible Gordon Ramsay impression. But I love to just say, if I can say, touch it. It's raw. I feel real guilt about that. For realsies.
That's awesome.
I feel real guilt about saying things like for realsies, too, now that I think about that.
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess that brings us to the end, sadly, because I think we should do this once a year, if not more often.
Absolutely.
Have all 4 of us on the mic. So, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Till next year.
Hey, thanks for listening to Pedagogy A Go-Go, recorded in the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology at Northampton Community College in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Our podcast daydreamer/showrunner is Kelly Allen, and Pedagogy A Go-Go is produced by Jeff Armstrong. If you've got any questions, please send them to pedagogyagogo@gmail.com. Our social media handle is at pedagogyagogo, and you can stop by our website at www.pedagogyagogo.com for copies of podcast transcripts, guest assignments, and other useful tidbits. Keep in mind there are no hyphens or dots in any of the above web addresses. Until next time, this is Gina and Tom saying, take care and teach well.